Hey, good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Philip Wegmann from Real Clear Politics will be here. We're going to talk to him about this speaker's race and whether or not Mike Johnson's going to make it through on the first ballot tomorrow. There was just a meeting in Speaker Johnson's office, and apparently everyone left and seemed to be conveying that it went well. I guess we'll find out. We'll get the latest from Philip Wegmann at 4:30. Then Todd Bensman from the Center for Immigration Studies is here at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden, responding to the terror attacks this week, stepped out to a microphone at Camp David yesterday, and this is what he sounded like.
I know I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who were killed, to all those who were injured, to all the people of New Orleans who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you. We're going to stand with you as you mourn and as you heal in the weeks to come.
An important message of condolences and support, but Joe Biden doesn't sound good there. For more on what's going on, I want to bring in James Rosen. He's a chief White House correspondent for Newsmax and the author of the biography Scalia. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be back with you, Vince.
What was happening yesterday? You noticed some things about President Biden's remarks yesterday that I hadn't seen anyone else point out. But once I looked closely, I said, James Rosen's correct. What's happening here?
Well, I don't pretend that these were my unique observations, but it was clear to me, watching President Biden's remarks from Camp David last night, not only that his diction was poorer than usual, but that he also was sporting some mysterious injuries to his face. He had a cut on his lower lip, a bruise on his chin, and a slight disfigurement to his jawline, all of which suggested that the 82-year-old incumbent either sustained a fall or some other kind of hard impact to his face.
Yeah.
I made inquiries of the White House today, and of course, there was no response.
Meaning that you don't expect responses from them because of your relationship with them, but they just refuse to talk to them, or just this topic would keep them away from it?
Between the two of those factors, the outcome is fairly well assured, Vince.
So I don't even know what to conclude from that. They just don't like you? Is that it? Because
they don't like me. They don't generally cooperate with me. And also, this is a sensitive subject, one which is not going to look good for the president, no pun intended, no matter what they would say back to me. So they chose to ignore it.
Well, the amazing thing, of course, about your relationship with the White House is you were asking all the right questions, the answers to which we unfortunately get much later. And the revelation was that the White House lied to us. So they spent the entire administration insisting that Biden was of sound mind and that they would say things like, "Oh, he's not going to pardon Hunter Biden." And meanwhile, you're asking all the questions about this, and then they finally everyone's admitting, Biden has poor days. He's got all these White House officials admitting that things aren't going well. I mean, what must that be like? What is that like for you to look back on that and go, hey, I was on the right track, and I was treated like garbage for it?
What you're referring to, for the benefit of our listeners who might not know this, is that in a news conference in the East Room of the White House on January 19, 2022, so not quite fully 1 year into Mr. Biden's term in office, I asked the question of him, and I stated that I was doing so with utmost respect for his life accomplishments and the high office that he holds. But a poll published that very morning in Politico showed that 46% of registered voters disagreed with the statement Joe Biden is mentally fit, and that not even a majority of Democrats, only 43% at that time, was willing to affirm that statement strongly. And I asked, why do you suppose it is that such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? And that was the first, and for about 2+ years, the only question put directly to the president about these mounting concerns. His answer validated the question in a certain sense, because all he said to me was, I have no idea. And he called on the next person. But I was blackballed from asking any questions in any White House setting for 8 months in the person of Jen Psaki and then Karine Jean-Pierre. And I was made to feel rude and fringy by my colleagues in the White House press corps for even asking that question. And lo and behold, we now, with the benefit of time and hindsight, can see that, in fact, I was asking about really what became, what was all along, the core issue of the Biden presidency.
Has anyone apologized to you for your treatment, including your colleagues?
No, I've discerned no apologetic impulses from any members of the White House press corps, but I'm not in it for anybody's apologies or for their kudos for that matter.
Yeah.
As a reporter, an honest reporter, my chief concern is compiling a more accurate record of our times. I also covered, I was there in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Casino.
Yes.
For what was really President Biden's last campaign appearance on behalf of himself after 52 years of campaigning, and that was at the NAACP convention. And he was struggling, this was July 16, to preserve his place atop the Democratic ticket. And he had already conceded in the wake of his disastrous debate performance against former President Trump that he, Mr. Biden, doesn't walk, talk, or debate like he used to. But as he told the NAACP audience in Las Vegas that day, I know how to tell the truth. It's central to his claim on behalf of himself, not only in that instant moment, but over his whole career. And yet, in order to believe that Joe Biden knows how to tell the truth, or if he knows how to tell the truth, that he is usually inclined as a matter of habit or instinct or even self-interest to do so, we would have to overlook an awful lot over an awfully long span of time, going back, for example, to the conclusion of the faculty at his law school that he had plagiarized in law school, his withdrawal in 1987 from his first campaign for the presidency over similar plagiarism accusations. And then you come to even the end of his presidency and the about-face on the pardoning of his son. This strikes me as something that biographers and historians are going to be grappling with for some time, Vince. The essential question about Joe Biden was whether he knew how to tell the truth, and
Yes.
if so, whether he was disposed to do so.
If you can take the long view, few guests can do that quite as well as you can in your knowledge of history. How does there are a lot of politicians, kind of by design, who try and spin the public towards their own policy preferences. That's not unusual. But it seems to me that Joe Biden stands out among American politicians when it comes to deception, and including how brazen it is. How do you view it?
Some people, when they speak falsely or they outright lie, are readily apparent as doing so, and sometimes we choose not even to hold that against them for one or more reasons. In the case of Joe Biden, I think it has been the pattern that he has spoken falsely quite frequently, and yet he has been able to maintain over all these years, perhaps stemming from the tragedy he suffered early in his political career when his wife and baby daughter were killed in a car crash. He's been able to maintain an image as being the very essence of American small-town decency. And again, historians and biographers are going to reckon with this. But as just one more example, again from late in his presidency, forget the fact that we were told that all of these instances captured on videotape of his increasing debility were cheap fake videos. After he left the presidential race, when he called former President Trump's supporters garbage, he claimed that there was an apostrophe out of place. And yet it was the conclusion of the official White House stenographers who lodged a protest about this, that when they submitted the transcript of those remarks, they had it such that Mr. Biden was indeed calling all of Trump's supporters garbage, and that the White House staff overruled their placement of the apostrophe in the release of the official transcript by the White House in order to make it seem less pointed and less of a denunciation of Mr. Trump's supporters. And again, when you're monkeying with the official transcript of the proceedings and the determinations of the official transcribers, that to me, again, seems a very brazen attempt to manipulate the truth.
Yes. Yeah, and in fact, the White House has edited hundreds of the transcripts that President Biden has created with his mouth during his presidency in order to change the meaning of so many sentences. This has just become so common practice by this White House. On the way history treats Biden, I'm curious your thoughts on the fact that Biden has made routine ovations to presidential historians. He always meets with historians. He has them constantly coming by the White House. He's had meetings with Doris Kearns Goodwin and John Meacham and Michael Beschloss, and they're coming over to consult with him. John Meacham's been writing a bunch of his speeches throughout his time in office. John Meacham even decorated the Oval Office. And I kind of wonder, I assume that this is just Biden trying to butter up all the historians so that they write nice things about him?
Well, we have to take issue, Vince, with your wording at the very end of the question. Mr. Biden has not been seen buddying up or buttering up, quote, all the historians. The three that you mentioned, all three of whom I should point out have been very kind to me over the years. Both Mr. Beschloss and Meacham have blurbed my books. Doris Kearns Goodwin has written approvingly of one of my books. But all three of them are unabashedly liberal historians, presidential historians. And so, you know, he was, in a sense, cultivating people whom he already could count on as having been supporters of his. But all presidents like to talk to historians.
Yeah.
All presidents care about history. You don't run for any kind of office if you don't care about history. As for how historians writ large will treat Mr. Biden, part of that will depend on how the second Trump term plays out.
Yep.
If for some reason it turned out to be a failure or disastrous in some sense, then, as has happened with other presidents and former presidents over the passage of time, Mr. Biden might come out looking a little better. But as things stand, anytime you fail to win re-election as a sitting president, there is a kind of patina of failure that settles in over your presidency and over your single term. And that is true even for George H.W. Bush, for example, who presided over the conclusion of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. If you run for re-election as a president of the United States and you don't win, history tends to judge you as a failure.
Finally, back to where we started, James Rosen of Newsmax, the injuries to President Biden's face, you've been asking about them. The White House is refusing to answer you. And have you seen any other coverage in any other outlet on this subject?
Not in any mainstream news outlet, no. I would also point out that when President Biden emerged from Marine One on the south lawn of the White House today, having returned from Camp David, and strolled the grass to get into the White House, taking no questions from reporters, he was kept at a greater distance than usual from the press pool that is assembled for such arrivals and departures. And his side of his face showed what appeared to my untrained eye to be a discoloration of some kind. There was no bandage evident, but something clearly happened to the president, and there was similar talk after he left Las Vegas in July, after the appearance that I just mentioned at the NAACP convention, where his face seemed to sport some injuries in the very televised address in which he announced his withdrawal from the presidential campaign.
Yeah, a lot of lies, unfortunately. James Rosen, thank you for constantly trying to get to the truth, and keep up the great work at Newsmax, sir. Great to talk to you today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Vince. Thank you.
That's James Rosen, Chief White House Correspondent for Newsmax, the author of the book Scalia. All right, let's see. Phil is calling in from Fredericksburg, line 1. Hello, Phil. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Happy New Year. Look, we do security for federal buildings all over the world with concrete planters on sidewalks. So if you had a couple of concrete planters on the sidewalks, that truck doesn't get to anybody. He hits the concrete planters, and the police dispatch him before he can get away. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they didn't have some sort of obstruction on the sidewalk, and they just had a car blocking the way. That is absolutely criminal negligence.
Yes, it is. And in fact, you know, I played some audio earlier for you. Let me see if I can find it again. This is the police chief in New Orleans, the grandma who runs the show down there, and she didn't even know that her own police department had a supply of what they call Archer mobile barriers. These are basically carts that they can turn on their side and will stop a vehicle if a vehicle plows into them. They have them out now. They have them out now in the wake of the attack, but they didn't have them out ahead of the attack. And the only reason that vehicle barriers were not up as usual was that the bollards are apparently being repaired in advance of the Super Bowl. So this is a 3 or 4 week window, according to local New Orleans media, that these bollards have been down on Bourbon Street. But listen to the New Orleans Police Superintendent, Ann Kirkpatrick, today.
So right now, I can declare to you that the Bourbon Street is open.
Chief, where did those archers come from?
Sorry?
Those yellow archers, where did they come from?
Actually, we have them. I didn't know about them, but we have them. And so we have been able now to put them out.
Okay.
It may not surprise you, Phil, to find out that she also does DEI trainings for the FBI.
She also ran over 2 people with her police car, didn't she?
Yes, she did, and she was stone cold sober when she did. They did a breathalyzer on her, and she popped a 0.0, and she ran into 2 people in I think it was August of this past year. So yeah, she's really done a bang up job.
I give up. God bless you guys.
Thanks, Phil.
Have a
Happy
good one.
New Year. There he is. So Phil's right. Stopping a car. That can be done. Even if you don't have mobile barriers, what do they do for these types of events? High-profile, well-attended events. They get dump trucks. They fill them up with stuff, and they park them at the end of the street to stop a car from doing exactly what we saw take place. Connor is calling in from Huntsville, Alabama, line 2. Connor, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Hey, Vince, I'll make this as quick as my southern drawl will let me.
Please.
I'm about 2 years removed from federal service, and I worked for a DOD component. We had annual terrorism awareness training, and toward the end, it was made clear that changing somebody's behavior and appearance due to a change in religious affiliation was not to be considered a concern for organizational purposes or law enforcement officers. So you could have somebody radicalized right in front of you, and there's not a darn thing you could do about it. And so that is the view that the Biden administration has taken toward radicalization. So much for see something and say something, but we can go to different school board meetings, and we can make people who protest lives a living hell and raid their confiscate their phones and raid them. But people who are actively engaged in behavioral changes, political discussion changes, they're off limits.
So in other words, some exercises
we created this problem.
Some exercises of the First Amendment are actually protected. Others are not. And is the standard here, and even that, really people who are legitimately exercising First Amendment rights, going to school board meetings, redressing their government for their grievances, those are protected. And yet we had FBI agents sitting in the parking lot writing down the driver's license, the tag numbers on these vehicles in order to keep track of these parents. Meanwhile, this terrorist Jabbar, he goes completely undetected until he mows down people on the street. But we are keeping track of traditional Latin masses and people going to those in Virginia. Beginning to think the left shouldn't be in charge of all of this, Connor. Thank you for that call. Coming up, and you did good. You delivered it at a perfect speed. Coming up, Philip Wegmann will be with us from Real Clear Politics. We're talking about this speaker's race. What's going to happen tomorrow? You're supposed to have a presidential certification on Monday. There's a lot hanging in the balance. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll be joined by Todd Bensman from the Center for Immigration Studies. The conversation we're going to have with Todd is about other terror attacks that have maybe fallen away from the headlines, but definitely have happened right here in the United States of America at the hands of illegal aliens, and what other threats may be here in the country right now. Todd Bensman, always digging into all of this. He'll join us coming up at 5 o'clock. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I've got some updates for you on what's going on at the moment with the Speaker of the House race. Mike Johnson has got the endorsement of President Trump to become the Speaker of the House yet again. That is supposed to occur tomorrow. That's supposed to occur tomorrow. And yet, at the moment, it's a little up in the air. The only hard no that we're aware of is Thomas Massey, Congressman Thomas Massey. He thinks Speaker Johnson had his chance, and now he'd like an alternative. There are other Republicans who have indicated that they are withholding their vote so far, although we have seen reports in the last hour that a bunch of those Republicans have just met with Speaker Johnson. Everybody left Speaker Johnson's office, and everybody's sounding a little bit more positive than they were, say, 24 hours ago. So what's going to happen tomorrow? The man who already knows the answer and will give it to us right now, Philip Wegmann, the White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics, joins us. Hello, Philip. Good to have you back. Happy New Year.
I don't know if I have the answer. I don't know if Speaker Mike Johnson has the answer. We better buckle up because it's going to be an interesting one tomorrow.
Yeah,
for sure.
It seems okay, but the stakes are high. I mean, this is you go back to the last fight over Speaker of the House where they unseated Kevin McCarthy and they replaced him in the end with Mike Johnson. Yes, Republicans were in control of the House, but they lacked control of the Senate. They lacked control of the White House. So the stakes were meaningfully lower. Here, it seems like the stakes are about as high as they get.
Yeah, stakes are as high as they get, but what you just pointed out is that there's going to be a new paradigm as soon as the new Congress is sworn in, as soon as the new president takes up residence at the White House. And his argument to some of these hardline conservatives is that he is frustrated about the spending that occurred this last year. He's frustrated about how a lot of these things have gone, but the political arithmetic is simple here. They have had, up until this point, 1/2 of 1/3 of control of the government. Now that Republicans are running the show, things can be different. And so going into this new year, he's trying to get Republicans on board. And Donald Trump's second endorsement is a significant part of this.
It does seem significant. So how much influence does President Trump's endorsement have on those Republicans who have signaled that they're withholding their votes, but they haven't given a clear answer on which way they're going to go?
Mm-hmm. What we were waiting for was to see how Trump played this. And look, all of us know at this point, the president-elect is very good at breaking things. He can break a status quo, but can he build up a coalition to achieve what he wants to? I mean, if you look at this last fight over funding the government, he was able to blow up the first deal, and then he asked for an extension of the debt limit, which he did not get because some of these more fiscal conservatives said no. Mm-hmm. And so what it ended up with is sort of a smaller continuing resolution. He didn't get what he wanted, but it was sort of different, right?
Yep.
And so now the question is, he has been able to take a bit of the pressure off of Johnson by signaling that opposition to the Speaker of the House would be seen as opposition to him. Mm-hmm. So some of these members that are holding out, they've got to ask themselves, are they willing to go back to their districts and explain why they didn't give Donald Trump the guy that they wanted?
Yeah.
That's their calculus right now as they try and get some, procedural, reforms in place perhaps for their votes.
A couple things to add here in terms of what happened in the last hour. We have Freedom Caucus members, according to Fox's Chad Pergram, were meeting with Speaker Johnson in his office. That includes Representatives Ogles, Clyde, Andy Harris, Scott Perry, Andy Biggs, Cloud, Crane, Chip Roy, Norman, and Higgins. Here is Speaker Johnson speaking to Fox's Aisha Hasni as he walked out of the Speaker's office immediately after that meeting.
Speaker Johnson, why are there still undecideds before this election, one day before the election? Why are there still undecideds?
People are talking through process changes they want and those kinds of things, and I'm open to that. And I think tomorrow's going to go well.
What's your message to the undecided, Mr. Speaker?
Okay, so sounding a note of optimism that he will be once again Speaker of the House, Philip Wegmann. These process changes that we're talking about, it does strike me that it's insane that members of Congress weren't really allowed to contribute to the spending conversation. That giant, that 1,500-page bill that came out. I can't tell you how many members of Congress we talked to who said, I didn't get to contribute at all. This is the first time I saw this bill is when it was shoved in front of my face and I was told to vote for it. My guess is these guys don't want Congress to run that way.
Yeah, they don't want Congress to run that way. And the response from Johnson is going to be that there are going to be Republican hands on the tiller this time around. He's not going to have to negotiate with a President Biden or a Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. But, some of the frustration from those Freedom Caucus members is that Johnson did not do more, even with the limited hand that he had, to try and force Democrats in a more conservative direction. And so while Johnson might be able to say, hey, I'm not going to drop a continuing resolution on you within 24 hours, a big part of backing up that promise is this idea that the Republican leader of the Senate and the Republican president aren't going to want to do the same thing as well. But what I find sort of interesting about all of this is that if you look at Johnson, he is similar to Chip Roy in both, if not temperament, certainly ideology. I mean, I go back to the Obamacare fight, where Johnson was the one throwing a wrench in the Obamacare repeal and replace debate because it wasn't conservative enough. He was, joining arms more or less with the Freedom Caucus members who were trying to push President Trump and then Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, in a more conservative direction.
Yes.
This is not your run-of-the-mill establishment figure. And in fact, last year when I was, profiling the Speaker, I talked to some of the more moderate members of the Republican conference, folks like Dusty Johnson of the Main Street Caucus. And he, I asked him, is there a more conservative speaker candidate out there? He said no. And he also said that, Johnson was probably the most conservative speaker Republicans have had in decades.
What happens tomorrow? My prediction, insofar, and who knows if this will actually come to pass, but my prediction is that for all of the reasons you just laid out, especially Donald Trump's endorsement, that Speaker Mike Johnson will be the speaker tomorrow. He's going to get those votes. I think it's going to go to a second ballot. I think the first round is going to just be just a shot across the bow, a little bit of just rattling his cage. And then those Republicans will say, almost all of them, will come out and say, okay, we're voting for Johnson now, but we wanted to make sure that message was heard. What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if this goes to a second ballot because the glass has been broken. Previously, it would have been a major scandal if a Speaker of the House wasn't elected on the first ballot. Of course, thanks to Kevin McCarthy, that's no longer a faux pas. He had 15 rounds before he actually picked up the Speaker's gavel. If there's one or two rounds where Johnson has to sweat a little bit, I don't think that's going to be seen as a major problem among Republicans. Obviously, the magic number is 218.
Yes.
Johnson can lose, I think, one or two. But look, anytime you have a protracted speaker battle, you're playing with fire a little bit.
Sure.
We still need to see who is able to catch flights and be in town for this. We still have to see who's going to, not just vote against Johnson, but perhaps just vote present. Hakeem Jeffries, of all people, is going to be watching this very, very closely as well. So this is the start of the second Trump season.
Yep.
And I think that your prediction is likely.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not averse to it. I think in the end, obviously you need a Republican speaker. That's going to happen. And if you want to roll up the newspaper and hit the dog in the nose every so often to get them back in line, maybe a little cage rattling is a good thing. We'll see. I hope it all works out for the best. But in terms of the priorities, you've got to have a speaker because Monday is January 6th. They're supposed to be certifying the election come January 6th, and you really can't do that without a speaker, can you?
Yeah. And again, this has been the argument from allies of Johnson, which is, according to the U.S. Constitution, nothing else can happen until a Speaker of the House is named. That's the first order of business. They have to get that done, and then they move on to certification. If they don't, then, we're in uncharted territory here, and everything sort of comes to a halt. But with Johnson, I think that you have a more conservative speaker than ever before, and with him, there's not this well of antipathy like there was with McCarthy. There were a lot of Republicans who just didn't like McCarthy for one reason or another. They didn't see him necessarily as the most ideological, but they didn't like the wheeling and dealing. Turns out some of the wheeling and dealing is a necessary prerequisite to surviving in this job, and we'll see if Mike Johnson can survive another day.
Yes, and for all the conservatives out there, this gets easier if you grow your margins. So if you grow your margins, then you've got your pick of the litter. You can pick a speaker that represents the voters and pursues an even more conservative agenda. That would be great. But in the meantime, Philip,
you make a good point. Republicans do not care about fiscal responsibility. They say they do, but only a minority of them do currently. And until they grow the size of that conference, and until they grow more, conservative members, that's not likely to change.
Yeah, that's for sure. Philip Wegmann, White House Correspondent for Real Clear Politics. Thank you, sir, for giving us an advanced look at that. Thank you. Good to talk to you today.
Take care.
All right. So, so that's where we are. And in terms of the constitutionality of all of this and what has to happen, Fox News' Chad Pergram is a great resource on this. And he says that, of course, the Constitution dictates that the 119th Congress has to begin at noon on Friday, which is tomorrow. And their very first order of business entirely is electing a Speaker of the House. So Congress gets locked up in that act. And they have to keep going until they choose a speaker. They've got to choose a speaker. Then the speaker himself swears in the rest of the body of Congress. That's when tomorrow all the members of Congress, the new Congress, get sworn in. And then the House will adopt a rules package, the all-important rules package, which dictates the way that all of Congress operates, the House operates. And then they can debate bills and voting and building their committees. So each of these things has to happen in order. So Chad says that it is hard right now to predict what's going to happen on Friday afternoon. He wrote this, I believe, overnight last night. But if the House dithers for too long, this could delay the certification of the Electoral College vote on Monday. The House and Senate must meet in a joint session of Congress on January 6th to certify the election results. No House Speaker, no joint session, he says. One other thing. Yes, January 6th, very important, certainly important to Donald Trump, certainly important to the country. But beyond that, we have to start confirmation hearings before Inauguration Day. And you only have a very limited window of time here. We are, 18 days away now, not even, from Inauguration Day. From Inauguration Day. So this period, these next 18 days, really is a small window of time for us to have confirmation hearings for all of these deeply important cabinet members to join the Trump administration as soon as humanly possible. And if anything, if you take away any message from these terror attacks in the last 48 hours, one of them should be we need competent leadership very quickly. And so all of the national security officials, all of the defense officials, all of the people who are tasked with protecting the homeland, they need to be in position as soon as humanly possible. And that requires advise and consent. That requires the Congress getting things underway very quickly. So the Congress has a lot of business to deal with. And we got to eliminate the distractions as soon as possible so we can get to that business so that President Trump could set about the agenda that he was elected on. All right, let's see. Joe is calling in from Alexandria right now, line one. Hello, Joe. You are on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Hi, Vince. Good afternoon.
Good
Vince.
afternoon.
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
I would hope that you would take a moment, as we're having this discussion about the speaker, to review for the audience what will be the Republican majority seat count as of this swearing in. How many seats will be vacant from what states, and those that are going to need special elections, I believe, to fill those seats.
Yeah. So
to kind of take a big picture view, because I'm concerned that it seemed we had a 6 or 7 seat majority, and now we have shrunk significantly.
Yes.
And the president on President Trump has pulled some key talent from the House, out of the House.
So here's where we are. The answer on that particular front, not yet, although they are leaving the House. So that's Elise Stefanik and Mike Waltz. So they will be present for tomorrow's proceedings and for January 6th and in the ensuing time, pending their own confirmation to those roles. But to your point, what we're dealing with right now is 219 to 215. Unless Congressman Matt Gaetz shows up tomorrow and says, swear me in, I'm a part of the votes, which we don't expect to happen because Matt Gaetz has already said he's not coming back to Congress, although he won re-election to the seat. We'll be at 219 to 215. Now, when Mike Waltz and Elise Stefanik leave to go to their respective positions in the Trump administration, that puts us at 217 to 215, at least for that window of time. In other words, right to your point, Joe, this is as close and as thin as you can almost possibly get. It's a two-vote majority at that point for Republicans. So you're dealing with a very tight House. So Speaker Johnson, should he continue to be in that role, has a very difficult task ahead of him coming up this year.
Yes. And I kind of wanted to make this statement that now seems to be the time for all good men and women to come to the aid of their country, not career advancement. To that point, I think Congresswoman Stefanik and Waltz should remain, talk to the president, respectfully decline, look at this as strategy, because if the votes are not there, the Trump agenda is going to fail. I do not see Democrats coming to pick up the slack to give the Republicans the vote.
Well, and also Republicans need to hang together. Obviously, in both of those cases, we're looking at districts where you will have a Republican likely replacing both of those lawmakers. But to your point, Joe, this is a pivotal time. The very beginning of a presidential administration is really where you have all of your political capital.
Up in New York, I'm originally from upstate New York, west of where Ms. Stefanik is. She's above Albany. Yes, that's a Republican district, but a special election has to be called by a Democrat governor. I think Hochul is going to drag her feet.
Yeah, I'm not sure about New York. For right now, I'm not staring at New York law or how much is mandated, how tied her hands are on this subject. But at the moment, Joe, when President Trump made that announcement, I do give him the benefit of the doubt that he has to be cognizant, of course, of the implication of taking lawmakers and then moving them to other positions. So we'll see. We got to have a little faith in him here. We'll see what happens. But Joe, thank you for being on guard for it. Good to talk to you.
Much.
There's Joe bringing up a very important issue, which is it's a thin margin. It's a very, very thin margin in the House, and we do well to remember that. Hey, coming up, we're going to be joined by Todd Bensman here in moments, and he's going to chat with us about terror attacks that have been taking place in the United States, including, do you remember the terror attack that took place in Chicago on October 31st? Maybe not. It didn't get much attention, but it involved an illegal alien. And we'd like to stop those attacks, maybe get control of the border. We have enough problems here. Why would we import more? Todd Bensman gives us the latest on what it's going to take to get control of a really out-of-control border issue. Todd Bensman's up next on The Vince Coglianese Show.